Wake up deeper. We all know about sleeping deeply, how good it feels to have slept well through the night. But what about waking up deeply? Waking up deeper. I heard that phrase in a podcast that I listened to while I was on my retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, what a great description of Advent that is, waking up deeper. Advent is our church season which calls us away from the hubbub of Christmas in order to focus our hearts and minds on the coming of the Christ child. Many of the Advent readings and hymns have that theme of staying awake, staying alert. But what are we keeping awake for? And why do we need to be more deeply awake? The earliest Christians thought they needed to keep awake literally in case Jesus returned. You know, he was going to kind of come back that night. But we would interpret those passages today to mean more that we need to be watchful and alert and awake to the signs of Christ's presence within us each and every day, rather than some faraway time in the future. We simply need eyes to see that presence. It's to do with how we look at the world. A couple of weeks ago, when the earthquake happened in Kaikoura, Mr. Brian Tamaki saw sin everywhere. We see earthquakes and we see people rushing to rescue and to offer food and comfort. Those truck drivers driving through the night to get the supplies through. The Navy leaving their birthday party to go and ferry people to safety. Those wonderful volunteers who wanted to get all the power off the rocks. We see Christ's presence every time we open our eyes. Isaiah the prophet, who was writing in the 700s BC, is working at a time when Jerusalem is coming under siege from all sides. And we're told that this is the word that Isaiah saw concerning Judah. Not this is the word that Isaiah wrote, or this is the word that Isaiah said. This is what Isaiah saw concerning Judah, which was the southern kingdom, and Jerusalem. He saw nations gathering in peace on the holy mountain of Jerusalem. And he saw their swords being made into ploughs to plough the fields, and spears being made into pruning hooks to prune the vines. He saw weapons of war becoming tools of peacetime. He saw that it could be possible. Isaiah was deeply awake. The people of the time, unfortunately, were less awake. They could not see possibilities for peace, and eventually Jerusalem would fall, and Isaiah's vision would become something that was longed for way in the future, way out of reach, instead of something that had been at hand right in front of them. In a similar way, Jesus, in the chapter of Matthew that we heard today, is answering the disciples' question, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Because they've waited so long, they think it's all going to be far away in the future. When is everything going to finally be put right? When will the visions of the prophets come to pass? When will we see what Isaiah saw? And Jesus says, well, about that day and that hour, no one knows. So don't try and predict it into the future. Instead, be ready now. Be ready always now. Wake up deeper. The Advent themes of hope and peace and joy and love all call us to be awake and to notice. What signs of hope do we see right in front of us today? In our office this week, we've been getting to know Harley, the dog that Ian is training to be a companion, a mobility companion dog. He'll be coming to church soon when he's a little bit older. That's a sign of hope. On Friday, I got to cuddle baby Annabelle, Tom and Emma's new baby. Boy, that was a sign of hope. We've got 5 couples getting married here this weekend, 3 yesterday, 2 today. Wonderful signs of hope. And many of you, members of our own community, are facing challenges, health challenges, other challenges, with courage. Signs of hope. When we were talking about Advent themes this week, Kate said in the office, if we can't recognise these signs of hope, which are right in front of us now, how are we going to recognise Christ when he's born at Christmas? Advent is getting us ready to see Christ face to face. We're going to be waking up deeper and sharing what we see this year on social media. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, you can share a thought or a photo for our Act of Advent campaign. So this week we're looking for acts of hope. When you walk out today, tomorrow, the next day, what do you see? It might be a flower blooming. It might be something someone says to you. It might be someone who encourages you. So we're going to encourage you to post that if you can yourself, or if you're not on either of those mediums, email them into us and we'll do them. But remember, if it's Twitter, you only get 140 characters, so you have to be brief. Join in with us so that together we can wake up deeper. You might also want to look back on things in your life and see signs of hope through your life. I've been doing a bit of looking back in the last few weeks because on Wednesday I'm going to celebrate the 25th anniversary of my ordination, St Andrew's Day. I was 28 years old and I was 6 months pregnant the day I was ordained in Wellington Cathedral by the late Archbishop Brian Davis. And the thing I remember most about the service was worrying whether I would faint when I knelt before the bishop, because I discovered that being pregnant, if I knelt down, I got very lightheaded and was likely to faint. But I didn't faint that day. I concentrated real hard. And there was a bit of tut-tutting in those days, ordaining someone who was pregnant. Would the baby be ordained too? Everyone thought it was the latest joke. And Hannah still enjoys telling people that she's really a deacon. But looking back over 25 years of ordained service, it means 1,300 Sundays. Not that I've served 1,300 Sundays, but a lot of them. And I have a book where I record all my weddings and baptisms and funerals, and so I brought it up to date this week and counted up, and there were 115 baptisms, 56 weddings, and 97 funerals. Numbers that represent each one, a story, a person, a family, lives. I'm very grateful for all those people who have offered me the privilege of sharing their lives in their happiest and their saddest moments, and lots of moments in between. Looking back, I think 28 was pretty young to be ordained. What on earth was the good bishop thinking? And I found people straight away treated me differently, listened really seriously to what I had to say, which I found the most scary part of it all. But in the ordination service, the bishop prays that the candidate will be empowered by the God of grace. And so I'm grateful for that grace, which, as the prayer says, is gentle as a dove and living and burning as fire, all at the same time. Gentle as a dove and living and burning as fire. 7 people in our diocese had that prayer prayed over them yesterday. 7 new clergy, some of them deacons, some of them priests. But the way forward for the church and for God's mission in the world is, I think, a lot less clear for them today than it was for me 25 years ago. It amazes me, really, that people still attend worship, still want to belong to a church community when the church as an institution so often fails us. And yet I guess the reason you still attend and the reason I still show up on a Sunday, number 1301, I guess the reason I still show up is because we're seeking together something beyond ourselves. We're seeking something bigger. We seek the presence of the Spirit in our midst and to follow the paths of the one that we call the Christ. Joy and sorrow happen, grace happens, hope happens. In commenting on today's gospel, Lutheran writer Nadia Bolz-Weber says that we should be welcoming the thief who comes in the night, because the thief is the Christ who comes to take away all our baggage that we don't need and to take away all our certainties. I'm sure people in Kaikoura and Wellington will tell us that to be suddenly without one's possessions and security in a post-earthquake world is not a fun place to be. It's a horrible place to be. But they will also tell us that they are discovering support and resilience that they never even knew they had. Nadia says we should start making Advent lists. They'd be like Christmas lists, but instead of listing things we want Santa to bring us, we would write down the things that we want Christ to break in and take away from us, in the hopes that he could pickpocket the stupid junk in our houses or abscond with our self-loathing or resentment. Maybe break in the middle of the night and take off with our compulsive eating or drinking or our love of money. We could start making Advent lists of the things that we want Christ to take away. And so we turn up at church to be challenged by the words of Scripture, to be nurtured by our community, to be strengthened by the sacraments, to be inspired by the music, and to practice again the pattern of life lived out in the Eucharist, offering, thanksgiving, breaking of bread, sharing, practicing again the overall pattern of worship, gathering, hearing, sharing peace, being fed, being sent out. We practice here in church so that we can live out these things in our world where we are called to wake up more deeply. 25 years ago, I promised that this would be my life's work, and so I guess I'll carry on for some years to come. As we begin this season of Advent, we begin again the cycle of worship for the next year. We begin by being called to be awake, being called to watch for signs of hope, to be acts of hope. If we do this, we won't have to wait vainly for a future time when Christ will return. We will find that Christ is here already, very ready to meet us face to face.